Hi, my name is Paul Meeks. We're going to be talking over the next 20 minutes about protecting public safety using the best practices for barrier and signage placement at water control and hydroelectric dams. And this is important for several reasons. Already in the United States in 2017, as of mid-July, there were already 55 plus fatalities at hydroelectric dams and low-head dams in the United States. So this is a topic that's of significant relevance. I'd like to start first by saying why this is important to Worthington Products and to me personally. What you're looking at is an aerial of Lake St. John in Quebec. This is a facility owned by Alcan, now known as Rio Tinto Alcan. And what you're looking at here is you see a boom line, a safety boom, public safety boom line in this area here, a small water control dam that feeds into some hydroelectric control reservoirs. You've got a number of cottages around here, a golf course down in the below, a road coming out, and then a boat launch over here. And Worthington was contacted in 2007 by Alcan. They wanted to place a public safety boat barrier in this site, so we sold them the booms. No questions asked, and we just sold them the booms. Unfortunately, in 2008, we received a phone call from Alcan to let us know that a 16-year-old girl who was out canoeing, regrettably, there was a fatality when her canoe capsized against this boom line, this very boom line that was intended to save her life. She was unable to hold on to the boom, and she was flushed down through, went through one of the 3 spill gates, and unfortunately there was a fatality in there. So that was an eye-opener for us as a company, and for me personally, that we needed to do more than just provide safety booms. We needed to be able to give our clients proper advice as to how they should be deploying their booms, their buoys, and signage for public safety so that these types of incidents don't occur. And quite often is the case, that girl did not go out with the intention to die that day. The operators of Alcan did not intend that someone would die on the boom line. Both cases, neither knew what was proper at that site. They didn't know what to do. So what we're going to do with this presentation is to highlight the risks and then provide you some suggestions as to how to alleviate those. So what are we going to do? We're going to take a look at why you need booms, buoys, and signage. We're going to take a look at what a safe distance is for those booms and buoy placement. We're going to address the issue of whether water velocity influences the location and effectiveness of the boom line. We'll take a look at whether you can use optimal boom alignments to increase the effectiveness of the boom lines. Throughout this thing, we'll address whether you need booms below structures, and then finally, we'll take a look at what outside resources you can turn to for help. So to get started, I want to give credit where credit is due. Much of what we do here at Worthington and much of what this presentation is modeled after is the Canadian Dam Association, their guidelines for public safety around dams, which was officially published in 2011. And the Canadian Dam Association's guidelines is based on 3 guiding principles. Those guiding principles are that the dam owner, that's you, are responsible to manage your public safety risks. Principle number 2 is that the dam owner is responsible to assess and reduce the risk caused by the presence and operation of their dam. And finally, this is one that I think is really important, is that public safety is not dam safety. Public safety should stand on its own. It should have its own feet and its own legs and be its own entity with people dedicated towards public safety. Dam safety deals more with whether the dam washes away and what's going to happen. Public safety deals with the interaction of the public around that dams. So let's start off. Why? Why is this important? Well, often the case, this is what it comes down to. It comes down to an incident occurring and someone is going to sue you. You may win that lawsuit, but in order to win that lawsuit, it's going to cost you a lot of money defending yourself, in which case you would have been better off in the beginning just installing a proper public safety program to avoid those issues. And if it does go to a court of law, the courts are going to look at due diligence, they're going to look at defense factors, and they're going to ask certain things. They're going to ask you if this was a foreseeable event. Would a reasonable person in your position have foreseen the risk? And if so, you need to protect against those foreseeable hazards. Secondly, they're going to look at the potential for harm. So the higher the potential for harm, the greater action you need to take on your part to prevent that from occurring. Number three, they're going to ask if it could have been prevented. In other words, what did you do knowing that it was foreseeable, knowing that there was harm? Did you do anything to prevent this from occurring? And finally, they're going to ask who has control. And I can tell you right now, you're the dam owner. Ultimately, you're going to be found to have had control. So that's one of the reasons why you need it. But let's look at it a little more detailed. Why are you responsible for managing your public safety risks? There's two items here that are really important on this. I'm going to go through a list, but first of all, the public believes they have a right to access your site. That's incredibly important. Not only do they believe they have the right to access your site, but their interaction at your sites are increasing. Just look at your sales of kayaks, canoes, paddle boards even, and then take a look at all the social media popping up with daredevils out there, and you'll find that the interaction around your dams is significantly increasing. This leads to problems though, because many of your sites are unmanned. And the public who is attending these things, they're looking at these as if they're recreational features, and they're not aware of the risks. A hydroelectric dam, for instance, is an industrial facility. If you go to a fossil power plant or a nuclear power plant, you see fences all around. You go to a hydro plant, and usually there's access right up to the tail race. So the public views these as they have the right to get there, and they see them more as recreational. And lastly, if something does happen, they're going after you. No matter how stupid they were, they're still going after you. So what do we need to do? Let's take a look at what a safe distance is. If you decide to put in booms, buoys, or signage, what is a safe distance? So I'm going to ask you a true or false question. The safety barrier should be installed at least 300 feet, 100 meters upstream of the obstacle. Is that true or false? I would say to you, maybe. It depends. Before you can answer that question, you first need to define some zones around your facility. And the two zones that you need to define are going to be the danger zone and the warning zone. So what are these zones? A danger zone is an area where actual danger exists. That's where once someone gets in, the chances of significant injury or fatality are imminent. The warning zone, however, is an area around a danger zone. It can lead to and from a danger zone, but it's an area where a person has the ability to escape. So let's take a look at this site. This is a small hydroelectric facility up in somewhere in Oregon. And you see you have a safety buoy line stretched across here. You have a debris boom line here. So if I look at this and say, what are my danger zones? Well, my danger zones are outlined in red. This danger zone I would define as soon as you enter underneath this bridge, you are now within a confined channel. This view here shows low flows, but that's not the case for a significant portion of the year. So you have potentially high flows in this zone. You have a gated spillway on this side where someone can become impinged or sucked through. You have a water take up ahead, and you might have irrigation canal intake up here as well. Along the side, you have a parking lot, and I'd guess kids in the summer probably love to jump off this bridge. Below the power plant, you have potential for aerated water and sudden releases, especially because this is probably an unmanned hydroelectric power plant. Let's take a look at the warning zone around here. The warning zones are defined as the yellow areas. So you have the area below the spill gates, which is an area where you can potentially warn people about the dangers up here. You do have aerated waters. You may have gates that open without warning, so that's an area where you want to keep people out. You have an island over here where people can get on. It looks like there's a fence line there, but nevertheless, this is an area where people can get up here and get in. So we want to warn people of the dangers in this area. Obviously, all along the canal intake, that's a warning zone. And then the most important zone, I think, is just above the facility, which is where we would probably place our booms, buoys, and signage because we want to keep people out of the danger zone. So to answer the question, what is the safe distance above a power plant? It's not a set number. It is whatever distance is required to prevent people from getting into the danger zone. So the booms and buoys should be located in an area where A, an individual will not get trapped, B, an individual can escape, C, the water velocities are survivable, and D, there's non-aerated water. And if we just jump back and look at this site, I have some, if I look at the distance on here, the distance is about 800 feet. So if we came up 300 feet here, we're still in the danger zone. So that's why the distance is not really the factor you should be using. So again, they can't get trapped, they can escape, survivable velocities, and non-aerated water. So let's take a look at this site. So what would we be doing here? If I was in here, I would leave this buoy line there, because if people jump off this bridge, we still have a secondary containment system. The client here wants to keep debris out of his water intake up here. So he's got a debris boom here, and that's fine because you're directing debris towards a gate where they can spill it. But in terms of a public safety barrier, we know he doesn't want debris to be excluded from this area. So I'd probably put a buoy line out here. I'd put it above the bridge structure to an area where people can be deflected to one shore. I would also put my signage up on these areas, warning people of the danger up ahead, and the signage needs to be sized appropriately so they can see it long before they hit this area. I'd probably put a sign on the bridge as well, pointing upstream. So if we look at that, the safe distance, we would have a buoy line coming across, or if debris is not an issue, we could do a safety V type of buoy line or boom line out here that directs people to either shore. So we learn about safe distance. What next? Let's take a look at water speed. Does water speed, water velocity impact the boom line? Well, let's start off with our Alcan example. This is a photo of the boom line at the Alcan site. As you can see, the water is nice and still, and the reason for that is there's no gate operation taking place. So this girl might have been out earlier that day or maybe the day before multiple times, and this is probably what she would have seen. It does not look harmful at all. However, this is a control dam for a hydroelectric power plant. There's 3 gates at that spillway. When they open the first gate, your water velocity increases up to about 1.65 feet per second, which is about 0.5 meters per second. If you look at the boom line, you'll see that we start to see some distress on the boom line. When you open 2 gates, all of a sudden your boom line's starting to disappear. I think anyone looking at this presentation will agree that this is entirely ineffective, A, as a safety boom, and now it's entirely ineffective also as a debris boom. And our velocities are getting up to 4.75 feet per second. And then finally, once you have all 3 gates open, you see the boom line is stretched to the maximum. It's actually out of the water on the edges because there's so much tension on it. Your boom units have rolled over in certain places, but the water is totally rolling over this. So if you're in a canoe upstream of this or a kayak, you can't even see the boom line, much less hope to have this thing stop you or be able to self-rescue. Now, we do have a Flow 3D program, and we like to model these sites to get an idea as to how the boom line will perform, and our Flow 3D models match exactly what we saw in real life at this site. So that allows us to develop models and formulas for safe water velocities, positioning of booms, etc. So if we take a look at the site, we came up with a chart, and we wanted to determine what is the load on an average sized person at varying currents. And the reason for doing that is to figure out at what point can a person no longer hang on to a boom line, an average sized person. So here we developed a chart at various surface velocities and then what the load is on the body. And what we came up with on this from our initial round, now we're running Flow 3D models to refine this number, but right now we've come up to a number of about 1.65 feet per second. Now I will say this, people can swim in higher velocities, but at a certain point they tire out. So keep in mind this is an average sized person at a varying current. You have other issues at stake, you have weather issues, you have water temperature issues, you may have alcohol or drug issues where a person's not thinking right. So 1.65 generally gets us to the survivable water velocity. Something we want to point out about survivable velocities and what happens to a boom at 1.65 feet per second and above. Typically, your safety booms are roughly a 16-inch diameter float. As your velocities increase, your float starts to submerge. It hits the maximum sag, and water will start overtopping it. So your floats become 50-70% submerged, which means you have reduced upstream visibility, you have higher pressure against the boom, and that leads to a reduced ability to hold on to the boom. Now I want to point something out that's very important, and this would work like with the Alcan folks. So you may call up your boom and buoy supplier and you may say, hey, I've got a site where my flows are 3 feet per second. Will the booms work? Well, sure. The booms can be designed to work in those flows. The critical question you need to ask is, what's the function of the boom? If this is a boom being used for public safety or even for debris control, yes, the booms can withstand those loads. That's not an issue. However, at those flows, the booms are going to be submerged, which means they are not going to perform the function that you intended of them. So you need to ask those questions of whoever your boom or buoy supplier is, not just whether it can survive the loads. So what can we do? We get into sites, 1.65 feet per second is not that high of a velocity, so what can we do to allow us to operate in maybe some higher flows or get more utility out of the boom line? Part of the way that we do that is through alignment, and the way we align the boom that allows us to operate in some higher flows, but it also provides for smart boom designs. Most of you are used to seeing on a drawing indicating a boom line or a buoy line, and what you see on that drawing is a straight line typically that comes across. You may see something angled, or more recently you may start to see what we call a safety V boom orientation. So this is typically how it looks on a drawing. Nice and straight, no questions asked. However, once we turn the water on, water starts moving against these boom lines, what happens? Well, the boom starts to sag. I like to call this area here in the sag under straight line on the left, I call that the Buddha belly. When we have an angled boom line, our sag's a little different, but we still get that Buddha belly. The key point when you have something, an angled boom line, is you don't want this sag, the bottom of the sag, to be below your lower anchor point, because that's a trap zone. And then with the safety V, we come out, we still get a slight sag, but we're still not sagging below the anchor point. So what does this mean in terms of public safety and or debris control? Well, as we introduce debris in these areas, what happens? If it's a straight boom line with a sag, it has no place to go other than to get stuck in this center location. Where we have an angled boom line, it's going to get stuck down on that lower portion that sags below the anchor point. On the safety V, because we made sure that our anchor points are below the bottom point of the sag, it will be pushed towards the edges. So if we look at alignments for boom lines, what are our optimal alignments? Straight across is not ideal, especially if we're talking for public safety, because that's a trap zone. That's where a person will get stuck and someone's going to have to come out and rescue them. They cannot self-rescue there. An angled boom line, provided that the bottom anchor point is below the bottom sag of the boom line, is preferable. And then the third one would be a safety V, which is always preferable from a public safety standpoint. I mentioned that we have Flow 3D software, so we've run some initial models on boom line arrangements. So here you see your typical point-to-point. You have a kayaker on here. Let's see what happens. The kayaker loses their oars, their paddles, whatever it is, and they're drifting down, and what happens? They get stuck down in that belly of the boom. Someone's got to come out and rescue them, or they're going to get tired of holding on and they're going to be flushed underneath, which is exactly what happened at Alcan. Let's move to a different orientation. Here we have a safety V. This could also be just an angled boom line. Let's say your shoreline was right along the center line here. Again, you see your kayaker, your canoer in here. So what happens on this? Let's run our simulation. And the person comes down. This could also be debris. And notice what's happening. We're allowing the natural water current to push, to carry, whatever, this person towards the shore. This is where they can self-rescue. You do not need to send your people out, nor do first responders need to go out to rescue this person. Now here's an interesting statistic that probably most people don't know. 25% of the fatalities are fatalities occurring with first responders. The people going out to rescue these people, 25% of those folks are becoming the fatalities themselves. So anytime we can prevent a first responder from having to get involved, it's a good time. So that's a boom line arrangement. Now let's take a look at signage. No public safety plan should be done without signage. And a very important thing I want to point out, we mentioned we run this after the CDA guidelines. I'm simplifying this whole thing right here. CDA is a very intensive, encompassing set of guidelines, and it involves more than just booms, buoys, and signage. There's audible, there's training, there's site audits, and everything else. So I would encourage everyone who's interested in this to get a copy of the CDA guidelines to know the full scope of what's involved in a public safety plan. So signage is absolutely critical. Your signage should have a clear and simple message. They should be consistent. It should be sized for the required distance. The location of the signage should be placed before the danger zone, in the warning zone. And I'll give you an example. As I'm drifting through a spill gate and my head is bumping on the sign above the gate saying danger, spill gates, it does me no good to have a sign there because it's too late to do anything. So your sign should be placed well in advance of the danger. And I will say this, signage is so important, and the consistency of the signs. We see different colors, different wording, and everything else. And if you're embarking on a public safety plan within your organization, you should make sure that the signage at all of your facilities is consistent. And I would even say talk to the other dam owners along a river system or within a watershed that you're at to make sure that they're all using the same type of sign standards as well, because the boating public doesn't just go to your facilities, they go all over. But your signs can get quite large. Here you see some signs are 20 feet by 30 feet. How do you know what size your sign needs to be? Well, there's different formulas for it, but generally you take the width of the installation, so from the end point to the end point of the area where you're trying to keep people out of. So let's say this Alcan site, we had 300 feet across. We would take 1/2 of the length, which is 150 feet. So a person, when they're in the center, the sign should be sized so that they could see 150 feet to the left, 150 feet to the right. Now, some people say you need to come out in a tangent and size it that way, and I don't disagree with that. It increases the sign size just a negligible amount. So in this case, if we say we have 150 feet viewing distance, that means my signs on the shoreline should be a minimum of 4 feet by 6 feet. So let's wrap this up. Alcan, what do we learn from Alcan, the Alcan example? Well, let's take a quick look at this again. We had a safety boom line that was placed in a choke point. Is there any other place you could put the boom line? No. From an economical standpoint, I would argue no. You could, yes, you could maybe come out and block this whole area off, but I think that would be an uneconomical choice for the dam owner. So this is not the ideal arrangement straight across because you have very high flows, you have an uncontrolled spillway. So what would we recommend that you do here? First thing we would do is we'd say you come in and do a site audit. And a site audit means looking at the whole area. Now, I started off by pointing out some of the items around here. You have a number of cottages. I don't know if these are year-round residences or cottages. Either way, you have people living out here and you see all types of access. You have a golf course over here. We have a road running along that goes along here, more cottages. Here's my boat ramp, which is right by these danger zones. I see that I have a road or trail coming along here, and then I have this uncontrolled dam here. This looks like an island, so you have more access here. So you couldn't have this in probably the worst spot possible. So what would we do? Well, we'd come in, we'd do a site audit, and we'd take a look. And ultimately, we'd say, let's start with a boom line. Let's get rid of this straight across with the Buddha belly where someone gets trapped. Let's bring our boom line out into a safety V. Why do we want to do that? A, we want people to drift towards the shore where they can self-rescue, but also we extend the area of the boom line, which means the surface velocities at the boom line are going to be significantly reduced from where they would be in this zone. We would then take our sign standards and properly size our signs at the end of the boom line, and we would face them out so anyone coming in would see the signs. Danger dam. We have a boat launch here, so we want to put a sign over here warning people of the danger. I mentioned we have an island right here. So we either want to put a boom line or a buoy line here. If someone comes in and you have all gates open, I would imagine that the flows coming through here are pretty high. Now, we don't have any photos of what they look like, but I think it's a pretty fair assessment. So we would put some booms or buoys across here, and then finally, at any access point on our safety audit site walk down, if we saw evidence of people accessing any of these sites along here, we would put small signs all along this area warning people of the danger. And those signs would point inward for people, because we're not warning people who are on the water at this point, we're warning people who are on the land. And in this case here, they'd point out because that's where people would access. And then lastly, I'd have, again, a couple signs on the dam as well. So let's wrap this up. At the end of the day, you have to take a look at what headline you want. On the left side, we see an accident at Lake Linganore, which was in Virginia, I believe, Virginia or Maryland. And this is where a father took his daughter on her 16th birthday and several of her friends out for a boat ride. Unfortunately, this was on a dam they go out on every day with a very small spillway, but there had been some significant rainfall in the area before they went out. They had a small electric motor on their pontoon boat, which was not strong enough to overcome the flows. The boat went over the spillway, and regrettably, the girls were all rescued by helicopter. Their father died. So that was quite a memorable birthday party. And the sad thing about that is that that whole event could have been easily prevented with a simple boom or buoy line above that dam. And so I would say that the dam owners there were negligent. On the right side, we see a different example. This was a event that happened in 2017, shortly after the local utility, Alliant Energy, installed a safety boom above some spill gates and a hydroelectric power plant. And a woman jumped off a bridge just above this boom line, and I think when she hit the water, she decided she wanted to live. And fortunately, there was a boom and buoy line out there that she was able to hold on to, while first responders then were able to mobilize to come out and save her. So Alliant Energy, it says the key to saving that woman's life was that they had a proper public safety plan in place. Now, finally, to summarize, what can you do? The best site you can go to is two very good sites for reference. The Association of State Dam Safety Officials, which is damsafety.org. They have a committee on public safety around dams, and they have tremendous resources available that are increasing daily that you can turn to. The second source would be the Canadian Dam Association, where you can go online and purchase a set of the CDA guidelines. And then finally, the United States Society on Dams also has a webpage devoted to public safety around dams, although I would say your two best resources are going to be Dam Safety, which is ASDSO, and CDA. And with that, I will leave this for open-ended questions. In this case, because this is an online presentation, you can just contact us at, go onto our website at tuffboom.com, or email me directly at pmeeks, P-M-E-E-K-S, at tuffboom.com. Thank you.